let's chat about the power of gratitude. I've shared this several times on the podcast, but in this season, when we are with family, we are with friends, we have an opportunity to really think about how grateful we are for the things that we have, for the life that we have, for all of the things that are around us and surround us. I feel like it's never enough to be reminded of how important it is to express our gratitude, to be thankful, and to really find ways to make sure that we're looking at our life through this lens of we are so blessed. You know, it's been a busy, chaotic year for all of us in a lot of different ways. There have been a lot of heavy things that have happened in the world. And I know that is not always easy to absorb. That's not always easy to make sense of. For me personally, as a mom of four, and as a woman who is continuing to try to figure out ways to broaden my knowledge, deepen my faith, be a better human, serve at a better capacity, I have been praying a lot this year about what are the things I can do to be more active in my community, more active in my friendships, really making sure I'm pouring into the things that I am incredibly thankful for and that do matter tremendously in my life. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. How can we make sure that we're focusing as much as possible on being thankful, showing gratitude? How do we do that? And why does it even matter? So one of the things I want to talk about briefly is how important thankfulness and gratitude truly are. You know, our brains are set up to protect us. Our brains are set up to always be looking for problems and keeping us safe from danger and things along those lines. And because of that, our brains make up stories. And we don't always get out of the way to really dig into, but what's real, what's factual, what are the things I can focus on, and how do I make sure that I'm telling my brain that I'm safe, that I'm loved, that everything in front of me is something that's a gift, etc., right? We always have to be kind of playing that game with our brains. And thankfulness and showing gratitude is something that helps us flip the script. And it doesn't have to be this long, thought out, really elaborate plan of attack. It can really be very, very simple things. And I know as a busy mom, I've had to figure out ways to very simply practice this in my life. Like, how are ways that I can make sure I'm noticing what matters the most? How are ways that I can make sure that I'm practicing this idea of thankfulness as often as possible? And what I've learned more than anything is how much expressing gratitude really does shift my mindset, calms my energy, shifts my mood, helps me feel a little bit better from the inside out because I'm staying grounded in the present. I'm staying focused on what matters, and I'm looking at the blessing in all of it, even when life is hard and chaotic. And so let's talk about 3 things that I've personally utilized as a thankfulness practice, not only in my own life, but also in our family's life. And I'm hoping that maybe this is something that you can utilize or put into practice in some way in your life. And it helps you kind of change your energy, change your perspective, and focus on the things that really matter most. So the first thing is taking pause and noticing. And this is something that as busy women and busy moms, it is so easy to skip this. I am 100% guilty of missing this, especially when my kids are driving me bonkers. I don't always see the gift of the noise, the mess, the filled house that we have right now. As a type A woman, I can get really overwhelmed with all of those things and feel like, but how am I supposed to keep up with my role in the home? How am I supposed to make sure that my family is taken care of? How am I keeping organized in my own brain when everything around me feels really out of control? And so in those moments when my kids are ripping apart the house, playing games, doing what they want to do, I have to really dig deeper and go into this different headspace of figuring out where's the blessing in this? Where's the blessing in the mess? Where's the blessing in the chaos and the noise? It takes this active practice to ask yourself that because it's easy to go the other direction and get really frustrated and overwhelmed. But I've learned that this season isn't going to last forever. Where my kids are now and the ages they are now will not last forever. And while there are things that feel hard in this season, taking pause and noticing is one of the biggest things I've started to practice because I want to remember. I want to remember what the blessing is in this season. I want to remember what I'm thankful for. I want to remember my little kids' voices and the way my daughter makes her room up, right? I want to remember how my son builds with his creative mind and what he's building. I want to remember the stuffed animal forts that they make and the incredibly creative projects that they work through. I want to remember pieces of the mess because one day it'll be gone and I won't have it anymore. And so it's so important when you're thinking through, how do I get into gratitude? How do I get into thankfulness? How do I focus on this in my life? How do I implement it? It really is choosing to pause and take notice. So the next time you're in maybe a chaotic situation, you're out at a restaurant with your family, you are trying to do something in your home, right? Maybe it's cook a meal, maybe it's clean the basement, maybe it's going through clothes because it's the end of the season and everybody's outgrown everything. Maybe you're out in the driveway playing in the yard. Maybe you are with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors, doing something out in the community. Maybe your kids are playing at the park. Choose to stop and pause and take notice and really absorb what's around you, the sounds, the colors, the smells, what people are wearing, what people are saying, and just listen. And then say to yourself one small thing you feel grateful for in that moment. You know, over this past weekend, my kids were building a fort in the basement. And as I shared, sometimes I get really overwhelmed by the chaos and the noise and the mess. That's just my body. That's my brain. I'm a type A mom and I like things in order and I like things organized. And that's not the reality of a big family. We have a lot going on in our house and it's very chaotic a lot of the time. And so instead of like going into cleaning mode and getting overwhelmed, I just stopped and I took notice. And the thing I noticed the most was the incredibly creative way that my kids were explaining different pieces of the fort to each other, unpacking what they built, explaining what they were, talking about the creativity they put into it, you know, the little houses they built for their animals and the blankets they chose and why, and how one part was the roof and one part was the bed and one part was the yard. And it was so eye-opening to me to really see and hear them use their creative minds and talk to each other in that way. And I will never forget that because I paused and I took some time to notice. What are they saying? How can I just watch? And how can I make sure that I feel thankful for those things that I chose to stop and see? Because we don't always see them. Life is busy and hard and fast, and there's a lot going on. And so we have to choose to pause and take notice for ourselves. That's when we really get into this place of feeling thankful and remembering how blessed we are to have what we have in our lives. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. Now, the second thing as far as thankfulness practices that we go through in our house is a speak it out method, right? We talk about gratefuls. We talk about what we're thankful for. We talk about why. And so I want to share this with you in case you feel like it might be something you want to implement into your home, but it is something that we go through all the time. We actually just did it this weekend out on a hike. We decided to pick up Jimmy John's. The kids wanted Jimmy John's sandwiches. We went out on a hike as a family and we hiked up to one of the local mountains here in Park City. It was about almost a mile up to the top. And at the top, there was a picnic table. And we sat down at the picnic table and we all turned around and we looked out at the incredible scenery, the mountains. We could see all of Park City Mountain from where we were, which is so beautiful. And we sat at the top. Everybody ate their sandwiches. And we went around and we said, okay, guys, what are you grateful for? What are you thankful for? And of course, there's always silly responses because kids are kids, right? But we always take a pause to say, okay, we want to get grounded in talking about what are we thankful for in our family? What matters in our family? Why do we want to keep talking about it? Why do we want to be reminded of this? And mostly it's because we want to always be talking about the good in life. Life is hard and heavy. But the more we can talk about and focus on what we're grateful for and what we're thankful for, the better the energy can feel overall, especially in a family unit. Families have a lot of dynamics. Ours sure does. And there are moments when our family feels really out of balance and not really gratitude filled or thankful focused. And in those moments, I'm especially reminded of the importance of making sure we're always kind of getting back to this place of reminding ourselves how lucky we truly are. And so make gratitude and practicing thankful a family sport. Go around the table. What are you thankful for? Share it at dinner, share it out on a hike, share it anywhere. Kids will come up with the most incredible things as far as what they say they're thankful for. As I said, there's always some joking, like they're thankful for snacks. They're thankful for Christmas gifts. They're thankful for, silly responses, sometimes wildly inappropriate, right? But at some point, they always talk about family. They talk about God. They talk about Jesus. They talk about our home. They talk about health. They talk about living in beautiful places and going on vacations and seeing places they've never been before. They talk about things that are real in their day-to-day life. They talk about how much they love our family unit. And that makes my heart sing as a mom. And sometimes it just takes that intentionality of making sure you're practicing speaking it out loud so you can continue to be reminded in your head. And then the third thing is figuring out ways to carry thankfulness throughout your day. And for me, there's a couple different things I lean on. Journaling is a big one, and I talk about this all the time. And I will never not talk about it because journaling and getting thoughts out of your head and onto paper is one of the most powerful practices we can do because it helps our brains see what we're thinking, but also maybe what's reality versus a story. Our brains make up a lot of stories, and sometimes we can get into seasons where we miss gratitude and feeling thankful or looking at our blessings because we're too far into stories we've made up that have really been bringing our energy down. And so journaling is a big one. I personally also love like adult coloring books where I can kind of turn off my mind and color for a while and kind of zone out and think about really nothing. That's a big one for me. I am slowly continuing to work on how can I be better at practicing getting into the Word, getting into the Bible, reading my devotionals, and spending time with God. For me, that is a big one because the family that I have, the life that I'm leading, none of that would be possible without God. And it's important to me to continue to figure out how do I make sure I'm building that relationship and having that a part of my thankfulness practice. This is something that has continued to be an area of focus for me and will always be something I have to actively practice because it's important in my life. And it's important for me to continue to teach our family and my kids. So depending on whatever works for you, I strongly suggest figuring out ways to carry thankfulness forward in your day-to-day. Is it getting into the Bible and in the Word? Is it journaling? Is it things like adult coloring books? Is it simple things like shedding and sharing light and love on others? I talk about this too. One of the biggest things we can do to boost our own mood is to boost someone else's mood. So talking to someone about how much you care about them, how thankful you are to have them in your life. Talking to them about how they've impacted you in some way. All of that matters. And practicing thankfulness and gratitude by sharing that with others is a big way to carry it forward. It's a big way to take action. Some of the things I also love to do is get outside in nature. I love to put my feet in the grass, hike, walk, and do anything I can to breathe in the fresh air and really absorb scenery around me. One of the things that I am extremely passionate about teaching as a coach is the power of wellness walks. That's basically no technology walks. You just go outside with no technology, no phone, no headphones. You're not consuming anything except what's happening around you in your environment in nature. So you're hearing sounds, you're hearing birds, you're hearing animals, you're hearing the wind, smelling the fresh grass, you're feeling the cold air on your face. You're focusing on your senses outside rather than consuming something all the time. And this is another way to really carry forward this idea of gratitude and thankfulness is by shutting down the noise and getting intentional with some kind of practice. And so I really want to encourage you to think about how do you want to go through these three things in your life? How can you practice being thankful as often as possible? And to recap, it starts with pausing and taking notice. How can you really pause in the mess or the chaos or the noise and speak to yourself one thing that you're feeling thankful for in that moment? How can you share it with your family? How can you speak it out loud? By talking about what you're grateful for, talking about what you're thankful for, and really voicing your opinions and sharing your heart. And then the third is carrying it forward in some way, daily. Journaling, getting outside, spending time in the Word, coloring, doing anything that helps you shut down your mind and get into this grounded place of really remembering just how truly blessed you are. And as I said, life is hard. We have a lot going on. We all do. It's busy. It's overwhelming. There's a lot to manage. One of the things I talk about a lot in midlife health as a almost 43-year-old woman, it is an interesting season to really be in when you're nurturing your family, your kids are getting older, but then on the flip side, your friends are getting older, your parents are getting older, and you really get into this vividly wild place of being reminded of how finite our time is and how we have to be focused as often as possible on what are we grateful for? What are the blessings in my life? And how do I continue to make sure I'm pouring into those and focusing on those and putting energy into nurturing them as often as possible? And so that's what today's focus is. Make sure that you're taking time to really focus in on what are you thankful for and why? And put forward some sort of action every single day to make sure that you're expressing how thankful you truly are for the beautiful life that you're leading. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.